If managing up feels exhausting, it might not actually be because you're bad at it. Most advice out there about managing up assumes something really important. It assumes that your boss is rational, that your boss has clear priorities and consistent behavior and logical reactions. But the truth is, many managers aren't rational. They're messy individuals, especially sometimes the senior ones. They're messy individuals whose overdeveloped strengths turn into volatility and control issues and chaos for their teams. And that's why sometimes managing up can feel impossible. But it doesn't have to be that way if you make one change in how you interact with your manager. Stop managing your boss as a person. Start managing them as an operating system. See, operating systems, they don't have feelings. They don't need feelings to be understood or resolved. They just need the right inputs to produce the right outputs. And your job here isn't to fix a system. It's just to learn how that system runs. Recently, I've been coaching a Chinese candidate who joined what she thought was a dream job last year. But just 6 months into this job, her boss was dragging her through the mud. He was senior, well-connected, but he had a problem with boundaries. At first, it was pretty innocent. It started with a few little jokes here and there. In a team meeting in her first month, he said with a smile, "Honestly, we mostly hired you to look pretty for our clients and our team." Haha. She brushed it off because she didn't want to be difficult. High performers focus on results, not talk, right? Then came opportunities. He floated an idea of opening a new office together, just the two of them. She told him that her fiance was here with her, and so she couldn't relocate. And he smiled and said, "Well, you can always be adventurous, can't you?" The boundary erosion was subtle until suddenly it wasn't. He started sending her expensive gifts, offered money for her nails, talking about private trips and massages. In this period, my coachee just started believing that this is how it works, that navigating someone's instability is the job, but it is not. Now, you might be sitting here thinking, "Girl, this job is terrible. Why don't you quit?" And honestly, she did consider it, but she needed sponsorship. She had bills to pay, and the role did offer great opportunities for growth. So we sat down together, my candidate and I, and we game planned. We game planned on how to stop her spiraling boss from taking her down with him. And our game plan involved 3 distinct steps to manage up effectively. Step 1 is to map the pattern. Start taking notes, even documenting for yourself whenever your boss reacts strongly. Note what triggered the response and what they did in response to the trigger. You're going to start to see some patterns here. Maybe they panic about surprises. Maybe they reward speed over perfection. Or maybe they just need to feel in control. Whatever it is, slowly you're going to start to see the patterns in what seemed like irrational behavior. Because I can assure you, in reality, their behavior is perfectly rational to them. You just don't know the rules. As my candidate started to observe her manager as a system, my coachee, she realized that her manager would mistake her sharing personal details about her life outside of work, not as friendliness, but as something else. So this led us to step 2, design your inputs. Once you know the pattern that your manager is showing, you got to adjust your approach. Like if they reward speed over perfection, then you send the rough drafts and ask them, "Hey, can I get your early feedback?" Or if they panic about being blindsided, then you avoid mistakes and you message them, "Hey, heads up, this situation came up. I'm handling it my way unless you see a problem." So my coachee executed this perfectly. Instead of trying to change her boss, she simply changed the inputs that she provided to him. So she stopped sharing personal details about her life, and she firmly redirected him towards work topics whenever he would try to talk about his own personal life or personal details. And as a result, all the emotional dumping and office gossip melted away. And finally, this led us to step 3 of the process, to build power outside her manager's orbit. To do this, you want to scope out key relationships within the organization that you need to grow your career. Maybe it's a manager on another team who can offer you mentorship, support, maybe even a spot on their team one day. The goal here, ultimately, is to build value beyond your boss's impression and away from their sphere of influence. And an easy way to stress test your progress is to ask yourself, if my boss leaves or gets fired or turns on me tomorrow, am I still valuable to the organization? For my coachee, this source of power came directly from above her manager. The VP liked her drive, he liked what he saw with her maturity, and her boss's instability was no secret to the VP. So she booked coffee chats and even led a project with the VP and gained more exposure to a key decision maker and a stable decision maker in the organization. And over 6 months, after working through all of these changes, it all came together. So recently she messaged me on WeChat and she told me that she was on a plane home from a regional trip and the SVP was there and so was her manager. They had a blockbuster knockout trip, like major deals closed. She had personally just landed a promotion, which was growing her scope and influence. And finally, she was no longer operating under her manager's shadow. And as that plane taxied, the SVP told a story to the group about a partner company who had just fired their CEO for having an affair with his secretary. Then he said, almost casually, it doesn't matter if both parties are willing. As long as there's a power imbalance, the manager is always at fault. It was just a story, but it was also a clear warning shot at her manager and a vote of confidence in her independence all at once. And that is how you manage up with an irrational manager. Once you do that, you can finally breathe and you can finally fly. All right, it's time for melon break. As we always do, it's time to 吃瓜. And this time we got something really interesting. We have the Prime Minister, of Canada, Mark Carney, clapping back in Davos. So at the World Economic Forum in Davos this week, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney earned a rare standing ovation from world leaders, and his speech has made headlines around the world. In my own opinion, I think this speech is going to be one that's discussed by historians and textbooks for a while. In his very articulate and powerful message, Mr. Carney called upon world leaders to face a hard truth, that the strongest players created and followed the rules until one day it stopped serving them, and everyone else has been playing along. So I quote him in part of his speech, "We knew the story of the international rules-based order was partially false, that the strongest would exempt themselves when convenient. This fiction was useful, so we largely avoided calling out the gaps between rhetoric and reality. This bargain no longer works. Let me be direct. We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition." End quote. We all know exactly who he's talking about, right? Like, he didn't name it, but I don't need to say who he's talking about, do I? Later in his speech, he drove home this point again when he said, "You cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination." End quote. These words resonate so deeply with me, even as they reflect outside of geopolitics on careers, on the candidates that I coach who have tried to operate under the lie of a mutually beneficial relationship with their boss. even though that integration is exactly what keeps them suppressed and emotionally drained. And on the topic of managing up with a higher power that doesn't follow the system, Mr. Carney had his thoughts too. So he said, when we only negotiate bilaterally with a hegemon, we negotiate from weakness. We accept what's offered. We compete with each other to be the most accommodating. This is not sovereignty. It is a performance of sovereignty while accepting subordination. End quote. He ended with a sobering but also empowering statement saying, we know the old order is not coming back and we shouldn't mourn it. Nostalgia is not a strategy. No, it isn't. We've got work to do. So if you want to talk about this with your coworkers at work, then you can say something like, did you see how Canadian Prime Minister speech at the World Economic Forum went recently? How spicy was that? Or you can say with your boss or someone who you want to be a bit more professional with, you can say, did you hear about the Canadian Prime Minister's speech at the World Economic Forum recently? I was reflecting on a speech about how people tend to keep performing alignment even when the system itself is broken. It's such a good reminder to keep evaluating our organization and ensuring we're saying the quiet part out loud. Day Up is written, produced, and hosted with love by me, Jonathan Lee. If you want to support high-quality, free podcasting for Chinese professionals, please like and review this podcast. It would mean so much to hear from you. That's all for today. 下次再见，职场小伙伴们。